Hey pod people, this is Joe.
I'm Kel, and this is Cosmic Connections 101. We are on video today, if you can't
Yay.
tell.
I've even got a new microphone.
Yeah, and I got a little thingy to hopefully prevent my P's and B's from popping. Um,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
but today we are talking about a topic that's close to your heart, Jody. Do you want
Of
to
course.
introduce it for us?
Yep, definitely. I think we'll just end up calling it something like cultural connections because we just discovered we have different ways of identifying ourselves, even as Aboriginal people of this country.
Yeah. We were just having a little
Everyone
bit
likes
of
something
a chat
different.
before we started recording. And yeah.
Yeah, like you're
Okay,
fine with Indigenous.
I'm just like, just wait, just wait. Okay, we'll actually record before we start talking about all this stuff.
Hit record. Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to sort of chat about because we've touched on it obviously that we're Aboriginal, but um that means so many different things to different people. But I just wanted to sort of have a chat about what it means to us. Like we've never really had those types of conversations. It's just something we've always known, accepted, loved, and connected with. Like half of our family are Aboriginal people, black fellas from all over.
Yeah.
But your experience would be obviously a little bit different. So that's why I thought it'd be interesting to see because you've had such different upbringing compared to me. But for me, I didn't even know what Aboriginal was.
Mm.
Like I just always seen that there was a black person in the family and a white person who was their
Yeah.
partner.
And that is sort of how it is for all of our family. Majority of our, yeah, like family, there's one black parent and one white
And
parent.
white parent. Yeah. And the first time it was shown to me that my dad was black was when I first started school. Like
Mm.
I didn't know anything that it was
What
different.
happened for you to be like made aware of that?
It was in the tone that this so dad come to pick me up from school and um a couple of the kids, like dad's walking up with some of the other parents and we're all happy to see our parents and I'm just like, oh, there's my dad, I can go now. And they go, is that your dad?
Mm.
And just the tone, I'm like, yes. And they're like, but he's black.
Yeah.
And then I looked at him and it was the first time because I'm comparing him to other parents. And I'm like, oh, wow, my dad looks a bit different. And if the kids are saying it with a tone that was negative, you could feel it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
How old were you, Joe, when that happened?
5.
So kindergarten. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then I was just like, I didn't really understand why that was a big deal because
Because we were so
it
used
was
to that.
dad.
Everyone, yeah, in our family had one black parent, one white parent. So it was very normal.
Yeah. And for me, like, because Pop, he would always say to me when I was younger, like, even though obviously we're light skin compared to some of our family members, Pop would always say, never to be ashamed that you're like a black gin, that you're a black fella. And it just goes in one ear out the other because, you don't really understand it.
No.
But he would drum that into me, but I didn't really know what he meant. Like he'd always say, oh, we're Bundjalung, our family's from Lismore, like, talk a little bit, but I didn't really know the big picture of what that all meant. It was just
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then it wasn't until, and dad didn't really talk about it. Like he would sort of mention things every now and then, but not history, culture, nothing like that. It wasn't until Pop died. I was 13 and about to start high school, and it all started to sort of make more sense. And I started to get really, really interested in what it all meant. And I just felt a different type of connection.
So, Joe, did you ever experience any racism or anything like that while you were in primary school around being a black fella?
Um, Mum said that a couple of times I'd come home if once they'd pick us up from school and I'd just lay down in the back seat
Mm.
and she'd go, what are you doing? And then I'd say, oh, nothing, I'm just resting. But obviously she knew. And obviously,
Hiding from people
yeah,
to see. Yeah.
mum's white, dad's black. And, dad never really talked about race.
Mm.
Like he didn't talk about him being black and mum being white. It was just like a non
Yeah, it's a
conversation.
non-issue for us because it
Yeah,
wasn't
it's like it's
just
a
normal.
non-convo. The
Mm.
only thing mum ever sort of brought up was she, mum with her symbolism talks
Yeah.
was saying, because I remember saying to her, like after because she'd asked me, why are you lying down? Like, and even she was like, don't worry about what people say. And she'd tell me about her experience being with dad in the 70s and
Yeah, being pulled out for
60s and 70s.
interracial relationship kind of thing.
Yeah. And, obviously Nan was with a black fella as well. So it was like our family was used to it, but they copped a lot of shit when they
Yeah.
were growing up. And mum told me just, that we should be proud. We're like, one of the most amazing cultures on earth and we should be proud of who we are. I still didn't really understand what that meant. And mum just used to say, because I'd go, well, how come I'm not like dark like dad? And then, because we were really olive, obviously, when we were in the sun and growing up, but we were different shades of dad. And then she'd always just do like the milkshake kind of analogy or
Yeah.
coffee, I think, because they were coffee drinkers. And she's like, oh, well, your dad's like black coffee and, I'm the milk. And when you pour it together, it just adds a different shade. That's all.
And it's probably worth mentioning too that our mum is very white with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Blue eyes.
So it's, yeah, like as pale as you can get kind of thing. Like she would get sunburnt in the shade.
Bless your mum with your.
So yeah, we didn't get the lucky dark genes. We're very light skinned, but we tan.
Yeah, and like there's three of us, so our brother as well. Like we're all brown hair, green eyes, like hazel eyes, and lighter skin. But the thing about Aboriginal culture and feeling connected to your culture is it's actually the inside that is the connection, your DNA and your heart, and it's hard to explain to people, I guess. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like just this intrinsic connection, because we do live in Australia. This is where our culture is in the land.
Exactly.
Because mum would always get upset because she's like, oh, how come you don't acknowledge like me?
Yeah, because our mum is Maltese, and just Aussie,
English, Irish.
So yeah, she would say that to me too when I would just say that I'm Aboriginal, and I would try and explain to her, I'm like, I understand that, but because we are in Australia, I have more of a connection to my Aboriginal identity. And it's not taking away anything from us being Maltese. It's just because we live here. If we lived in Malta, it would be different.
Yeah, and that's what I would explain to her as well, because she'd say, oh, you're kind of like forgetting me. And I'm like, no, we're just acknowledging this part of us because this is what we feel most connected to. And I go, like, it's, no disrespect or anything, because when we do meet people and they ask, oh, where are you from? Like, what's your family? Like, you always say it.
Yeah, I always say I'm Maltese as well.
Bloodiness and stuff. But I remember just even connecting to cultural stuff. Like if it wasn't for Auntie Lou and the Donovans, like, which is still the case today.
Yeah.
We would always go, Auntie Lou would take us to the Knockout and Survival Day, which is now known as Yarbin. That's right. And just like cultural, just, I don't know, we just surround like music festivals, like lots of different stuff, just Aboriginal culture.
When I was a kid, she would take us to go see Black Santa. And
actually, Black Santa out of Mount Druitt.
It wasn't Mount Druitt. I was going to say, I don't even know where it was. I just remember being excited to go see Black Santa because, you get presents.
Yeah. And he's a black fella.
And that's kind of what we've also, like when our kids were younger, wanted to continue Black Santa, because we would get our dad to dress up in Santa because we experienced Black Santa growing up. So it's like we want our kids to have Black Santa too.
Yeah, we don't want them to be ostracized, and we'd always make sure they get black dolls and all different coloured cultures, because we're like, all we'd ever see is white everything. And in our family, it wasn't a true reflection of life.
Yeah.
And so
I remember growing up, because, like you said, we grew up in different times, so we have different experiences. But I remember being really little and watching TV, and I saw, the show I Love Lucy. And so
random.
No, I know. So that was the first time I had seen an interracial couple on television, because I knew that they weren't the same nationality. He wasn't black, but he wasn't white, because I was really young. So I just, I didn't know exactly what nationality.
He's
or
got
whatever.
colour.
But I just knew, that they were similar to my mum and dad. And I feel like that's why I really loved that show, and why I loved Lucy, like the show says, because it showed me on television that you don't have to have the same color parents in a household for it to be considered normal or abnormal or whatever. It was just my first time when my eyes were open to the fact that there's two different colored parents in a household. And I think that's literally why I love Lucy.
and you know why? I think it's like reflective of Nan and Pop, because Nan's a redhead. Yeah.
And Nan, like, she's like Lucy, sort of.
She was funny. I said, but yeah, that's a good idea. I never really got to see any of that. Mum was the one who like really introduced me to other cultures in other, around the globe. So like I learnt a lot of stuff about like Native, First Nations, America, Canada, Africa, stuff like that before, because there was nothing really in Australia about Aboriginal people.
How old were you when that sort of?
Mum would start showing us that sort of stuff because she loved those movies. There were some like blackfella shows, but there wasn't that many movies, or that I could understand, because it was pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, that's the case with a lot of Aboriginal movies in Australia, because they're just very heavy and not appropriate for kids.
Yeah, but then it's like the truth. And then Dad didn't really know a lot of the history. So it wasn't until, Pop died, like around, I would say 13, is when I really started understanding what he meant.
Yeah.
About,
being proud.
Being proud of like, what that really meant, because I started to feel it in my body. And then I went to high school at Sarah Redfern at Minnow, and there's lots of black fellas there, right? And so we used to have, instead of sport, we had the option to do cultural classes. Oh, it was so good. And, I was already like, artwork and everything, but like it really got me really connected. We do dance, me, man, I'm not a dancer, that's your world. But like it was fun. Like, they teach you how to do different styles of Aboriginal dance, and Torres Strait Islander. I'd never even heard of what that was.
I love Torres Strait Islander dances. Do you remember, Jo, when I was in the opening ceremony of the 2000 Olympics?
This is what I'm getting at, because I'm like, my high school experience was learning this stuff at school, and then obviously then there was so much more awareness, and I learned history there, and I started understanding what really it meant in this country, what it meant, White Australia policy, started learning all this stuff, go back, talk to Mum and Dad about it. They'd never heard of it.
No.
But Dad lived it. So then he'd be like, oh yeah, I grew up on a mission. I didn't even know Dad grew up on a mission until we were going back to Lismore for a funeral on a train. And he's like, Bub, this is where we used to walk. And he'd go from here, gone for fucking 10 minutes in a train, and he goes to here. I'm like, Dad.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What? How old were you then when you learned that?
I reckon like about 18. Like he just didn't really talk about stuff.
No, he didn't. Yeah. Like, no. I think that I've learned more stuff about Dad's growing up from you than him. Like he just doesn't talk about
because I started learning at high school, like just because of my experience at Minnow, they bring a lot of cultural stuff in, and I would learn more. And then I'd, we didn't have the internet, so I'd look at the library and, it is his story, not our story.
Yeah.
So there was only like a little bit of info. And then it was more then starting to talk to the family, because we have lots of black and white people in our family. So then I'd start talking to them about their experiences, where they're from. And, me, I like to talk. And I think that's where it probably come from.
Curious about it all.
My curiosity of all that stuff. And then obviously when I went to Ashcroft High, coming from Sarah Redfern, got to Ashcroft and there was nothing.
Yeah.
But I'd meet people and I'd go, oh, you're Aboriginal, eh? And they go, oh, nah. I'm like, oh, are you, like, don't be ashamed, mate. Like,
like they're just saying that they're not to,
because they don't really know.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, no, like, yeah, one of my parents is, so I'm part Aboriginal. I said, no, you can't be part. You are.
It's not this part. This farm is Aboriginal.
Yeah, but like I get it. And then, Ashcroft, I think that's where, like, because I got there in halfway through year 8, and that was where I got to really push my passion of Aboriginal culture and connection and bringing people together. So, we set up, because I think you had to have 20 Aboriginal kids to identify to get an ASPA committee.
Yeah.
And so, I helped make that happen, got people making sure they're identifying. Then we started having our own little, try to get excursions and all that sort of stuff happening. Auntie Lou got us help with bringing some, at that stage, NRL bloody legends to our high school to play touch football with the guys and the girls. So Ricky Walford, Cliffy Lyons, Jeff Hardy, Uncle Greg come and, showed them how to cut boomerangs and shields, and it was just amazing. So it exposed heaps of the people, even though my school had a lot of different cultures, it just exposed people to a positive thing about Aboriginal culture.
And also it provides a support network for Indigenous students.
So. Yeah, and then when I finished, they were trying to get this excursion to Wreck Bay, and then finally, I'd already finished year 12 and I got won an Aboriginal Leadership Award, and by the time I'd finished, they finally got this Aboriginal camp up and running, and they actually invited me back after I'd already finished high school to thank me. And then obviously that's when you and our bro is at high school, and then what was your experience there?
Well, I'd actually take it further back to when I was in primary school, because we had an Aboriginal support system in primary school. So I always just knew that we had help for if I wanted to go on a camp or an excursion, there was Indigenous funding or something available to help Aboriginal students be involved in what the wider community of the school was going to. And I knew that, there were a couple of Aboriginal kids at my school. And we all just knew each other as being blackfellas, and that young though, we were proud to say I'm Aboriginal, and it wasn't, there was nothing I didn't have the experience that you did of hiding from people who saw that my dad was black. I never had any of that, thankfully. And then when I went to high school, it was already well established that we had an Aboriginal counsellor, that there's a lot of black kids at the school, and we all knew each other because there would be just, catch-ups. We had once, a month or once every couple of months, just, all the black kids can just go and have afternoon tea together and just hang out. And, as I got further along in school, we had after school tutoring with all the black kids. And, all throughout my high school, we had camps, we had excursions, and a lot of support. I always felt like if I just needed a timeout from a lesson, not even any reason, if I just felt a bit off or whatever, I could just go and see Auntie Barb and just sit with her and talk or have a cup of tea, or, I didn't ever feel like I had no support. And I guess non-Indigenous people might not understand how important that is for Aboriginal people to just have a mentor or somebody who gets it and who understands your mindset, or just, the comfort that we get from being around other blackfellas. So I just feel like I thankfully always had that kind of support. And obviously it's thanks to you at my high school that I even got to experience that sort of support, because you're the one who laid the foundation for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really understand. It wasn't until I started doing my own research that you don't know that the reason that support is now in place is because we were never classed as human beings, so we didn't have access to education, hospitals, any of the thing that the wider community had. Aboriginal people were voting shafted. Well.
We weren't allowed.
Yep, it's we weren't included as a human being. So it's
literally we were flora and fauna. That's what
and now, when people say, oh, it happened so far in the past, get over it. It's no, actually, my dad was impacted, which means we're impacted because we're not living that style of, life. So our connection to country, we have to find in a different way to make sure it's still living and breathing, because it's such an important part of this country. It shouldn't be forgotten. It can't be.
And the thing is, at school, that sort of pride around identity of Australia owning its Indigenous identity. Like that isn't a thing, even still in this day and age, you know, like Australia don't really embrace the fact that they have the oldest surviving culture here. Like it's so special, and you know, they don't understand how incredible that is. Like when I was at high school, I remember just being in history class, and there were times like if we were learning about Aboriginal issues, I would feel like a bit of embarrassment or shame or something. Like it would make me feel so uncomfortable, and I'd kind of like make an excuse to leave the room. Like I pretend I need to go to the bathroom just so I could get away from it, because the subjects that they were talking about was just always negative, or you know, just the bad stuff that happened to our people or that our people did, and it was always just such a negative thing. And I feel like I carry that on in my life. Like the perception that Aussies have of Aboriginal people in this country is bad. And, you know, I'm always on the defense, like ready to arc up at somebody. If I hear them talk about Indigenous something, I just assume right away it's going to be something bad. But like a couple of weeks ago, Joe, when you were back in Sydney, you had a similar experience where by default you're like on edge, but then you heard the actual conversation.
Oh, it was so mind-blowing, like, because obviously I hadn't caught public transport in like 10 or 13 years or whatever. And same thing, it's like you're ready to defend your family.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like.
It
feels like a personal attack. But it's because, you know, people just don't have the same type of understanding. But it's definitely shifting and changing, because, yeah, as soon as I got on the train, the first conversation, 3 people sitting in front of me start talking. First thing, it's like, oh yeah, Aboriginal or something, and I'll go in. Here we go.
That whole
please
in
no.
Your body, hey, you
my body started to tense up. But
yeah,
I'm so proud and happy to hear the rest of the convo, because it was them understanding and defending Aboriginal culture and saying how amazing and special it is, and they were training to be like nurses and doctors and teachers, and so they were talking about, you know, all of the old policies in health and education that impact Aboriginal people, and why it's important to make sure that there are these support mechanisms around for Aboriginal people, because there is a distrust of the government. Like, how can there not be? So it's like to help support that. It's not taking, this is what people don't understand, it's not taking away from anything. It's providing support that was never there for all these years. Just to sort of get people on par. But
that's what I was going to say, to get people on the same playing field, because just, you know, based on the history of how Aboriginal people have been treated in this country, there is that apprehension to trust anyone of authority, especially, you know, police and hospitals, because, you know, that's
taking
where
babies
people
away.
take the baby. Yeah. So, you know, it's like intergenerational trauma. This stuff is still carried on. This distrust in the government and authority figures is still here today.
100%. And yeah, just hearing the next generation be so positive and optimistic and understanding was like, oh wow. And I just felt relaxed and super proud.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yes.
Yeah, because
go people. Like, they get it now.
Spend our whole lives defending or trying to just say, like, look, we don't get extra money, free houses, free.
Oh, what? Didn't you get a free house?
Oh no.
I know. Tell me about it. It's like, no, it's because the government is trying to, you know, we didn't get the same type of understanding as New Zealand. They got treaty. You go over there, their languages across everything. Ours was always like, they just try to demolish our existence.
Literally.
Massacres. They don't want your language.
They wanted to breed us out. Like, they wanted to breed the black out of us. And that's why we are, you know,
staunch in who we are. And it's, you know, I have been to Malta. So when I went to Malta with Mum, I did feel a connection when I was there, but I don't speak the language. I don't know the history. Mum didn't teach me anything about it. I said, but here in Australia, I have a heart connection because the country talks to me.
Yeah, like literally the land. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, and it's like just the connection is here. And so, you know, and then, you know, we work in Aboriginal positions and you just have a different understanding about, and it's just such a different, like the humor's very different. It's hilarious. But, you know, even if you watch black comedy and all these different stuff on TV, like they're hilarious. Lots of people get it now. And it's just, embracing. But the thing I used to be interested in, it's more people will tell you Native American, like they could tell you like what tribal names and stuff, but they would never be able to tell you what ones they're standing on here in Australia.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest thing. It's just learn where you're standing, like acknowledge the people in the country that you're, which land, whose land you're on.
I feel like there's a lot more awareness around that now, especially you know, ABC News, they acknowledge the country that they're broadcasting from beforehand. And sometimes, you know, they'll like give acknowledgement in language. And just, you know, Australia Post, they've also
the anthem.
Yeah, they've also included, you know, Australia Post, you can write what country that is going to. So
yep.
You know, like different stuff like that. And I mean, if you go into the shop as well, like Optus, and they'll have the plaque there that acknowledges the land that they're on. So, you know, there is effort.
Definitely
but then
changed.
Yeah, like, you know, you don't know at which point is it really meaningful or is it like a token gesture, you know?
Yeah, 100%. It's like it's like you can take it all as positive changes for now just to be seen.
Yeah.
And to be, you know, acknowledge that it's sort of out there. But yeah, it's actually, speaking of that, I only just said the other night we're watching footy and it was on Foxtel, and it was the first time ever, go the Bunnies, they actually, which they had, because I was playing in Brisbane, and it had Brisbane and then it had the two different Aboriginal language groups.
Oh, wow.
On like this, you know, Rabbitohs versus Dolphins, and then it had Brisbane and then the cultural language and tribal areas, that country. And then last night watching footy again, they had it there, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, wow.
That's
amazing.
It is amazing. But the you know, obviously this only just touched the surface, but I think it's just, you know, we're here, everyone just wants to feel connection. If you're living in Australia, just be proud that the culture, the ancient culture, is still alive and kicking. Yeah. And we're happy to talk about stuff. And we have a different connection. It's like we've got to move forward. We can't forget the past. There's been like some atrocities that happen, but we just want it acknowledged.
Yeah.
Because Australia just tries to cover up the fact that it didn't happen. It's like, it fucking did. And so I just go, yes, it did.
Yeah.
Let's get better.
The misunderstanding around all of that kind of stuff, like when, you know, if we talk about land rights or whatever, like they think that we want land back. And, you know, like all that we want is like when we're talking about reclaiming culture and stuff like that, it's like, you know, to be able to learn our language and to be able to learn our cultural traditions and stuff like that. It's like we don't want to kick people out of the country and have it just all blackfellas again. Like we want the wider
take you for a ride.
We want the wider community to have pride in our culture and embrace it the same way that New Zealand do for Māori people, where it's
exactly.
like, this is, you know, like a sense of national pride. And, you know, it's like, for me, I always just don't feel like Australia is proud of us, and they have like this perception of Aboriginal people being drunks and dole bludgers, and, you know, but I mean, that's just because of our experience growing up. That's what we were told. That's what people said to us. And, you know,
the media,
like you were saying, Jo, you know, like new generation coming through, they're already talking about, you know, why it's important for Aboriginal people to have support in the hospital system and all of that sort of stuff. So obviously things are changing, but I can't wait to see how the rest of Australia takes pride in our culture and brags about the fact that, you know, we are an ancient culture that's still thriving, like the oldest surviving culture in the world. Like, that's right. It's so special.
Amazing.
And it's just undersold and like no pride. Like it just really hurts my heart. So I hope in my lifetime, I see Australia really embracing our culture and our people and just loving the land and our people as much as we do.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky as well, because even though we've grown up with lots of Aboriginal people, non-Aboriginal people from other countries and just people living in Australia, they've been such, like before the word ally was a thing, like I already had so many of them, like even at school, like Gordy, Al, everyone, like Shivy, all of my friends, they always already had this appreciation and respect of Aboriginal culture. And then, you just talk about it. They meet dad, you have a yarn, and it's just like, oh, wow, yep, regular people who just want to love and protect their family and just be proud of who they are and where they're from. But the struggle's been a lot different. But it doesn't take away from the fact that other people's not, because we've got more similarities than differences. It's just appreciate the struggle that we've had to even have similar opportunities than other people.
Yeah.
But there's lots of different stuff that's sort of happened for us to remain connected with our culture, which we can get into another time. But yeah, this one went a bit heavier than usual, but it's really important. It's we don't do acknowledgements.
It's a foundation for you in who you are as a person, and like that is how you base a lot of what you do every single day with your spiritual practice is from in our Indigenous heritage and our culture.
Yeah, exactly. And I do appreciate that in this time and everything, that acknowledgements, and how we're talking about like tokenistic stuff, like that is a new modern sort of take on what used to happen to welcome people into each other's lands and everything. And although I do appreciate, I don't think we have to do it every 2 seconds. Like, I work in the government, it's just like sometimes it just feels too overly done. And I said, and that's why even doing the podcast, I didn't want to just over label and identify everything, because I just want us to be connected in the human heart space.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I think it is like important for us to have our own little, I think you put it on our little blog, didn't you, Kel? Our acknowledgement that we agreed is like the best thing for us. So I might just read that out if that's cool, because I don't think we need to have any questions.
Yeah.
I just want to say, as both of us, as Bundjalung women, right, we'd like to acknowledge like our ever-present ancestors and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, across Australia, across the land, the skies, waterways. We honour like everyone who come before us, who guide us now on our journey. And, we send that love and healing to all peoples in this land, this dimension, and beyond. And that's for me, that's the most important part of being connected to Aboriginal culture here in this land. I said, and I just hope other people go up and, do a bit of research on the land that they're living in right now. And you'll be surprised about why you connect to it or why you live there. There could be some other special meaning why you've been brought there.
Yeah, like you.
So that's just my little thing.
But that's we've run out of time to talk about the reason why you moved down where you are and how the land talks to you and calls you down there.
This is just an intro into like our connection to our Aboriginal culture, obviously. But then there'll be other ones later. But thanks for just letting us chat about this. It's always one of those really special combos, but sometimes hard. And, I've got a sore throat and it's the whole thing. But I've got me, eucalyptus oil, blackfella medicine trying to heal me. We'd love to share this experience and chats with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Bye.